presentation is by David Wood, also from the FWC, and his talk is entitled, wait for it. Wait for it. Here we go. Big fish and large floodplain rivers. What's the connection?
Thank you. Nice to be here. Excited to present this data to you guys. This is a really neat venue. Appreciate NEP for putting this on. And also thankful to have my parents up from Naples and my wife and daughter here. And earlier, Joel already spoke. As he said, we're from Fisheries Independent Monitoring in Charlotte. And our other co-author is Jerry Carter, longtime FWC law enforcement officer, and a big fisherman in the Peace River. And he really provided a lot of valuable information for us, and just a great partner in this project. So let's look at the river monsters here. We've got 8 large predators in our system, and the top 4 there are the freshwater predators, and the bottom 4 are Euryhaline species. These are fish that are in the estuary and in the Gulf, and but do great in the rivers also. Freshwater species are largemouth bass, long-nosed gar, Florida gar, and Oakland. And the Euryhaline species are snook, tarpon, redfish, and lakefish. And just to note, the snook and the tarpon, they'll go all the way up these river systems. These rivers, 80 or 90 miles from the estuary to its headwaters. And you can find snook and tarpon all the way up in these systems. But the redfish and the lakefish tend to stay towards the lower freshwater sections of the river. And from our electrofishing surveys that we've done in 3 of our rivers here, the Mosaic, Calusa, and Peace, these are the top flavors. These are the top, the 3 most abundant. Typically, Florida gar is the most abundant, followed by snook and redfish. So it's interesting, we think of snook as being an estuarine species, but here it's many times the second most abundant large predator in the system. So sometimes it's even the first. So that's the species I'm going to talk to you about this morning. Common snook. It's a tropical species. Here in Florida, it's at its northern part of its range. It ranges from Florida through Mexico, Central America, and Brazil. And like I mentioned earlier, it's a Euryhaline species. It's a marine obligate spawner. It needs to be in high salinity waters in order to have a successful spawn. So that's why if you fish for snook, or you know people who fish for snook, summertime is their spawning season, and snook congregate around inlets and in the saltier parts of the estuary in order to spawn. These fish get really large, over 40 inches, and they support a popular recreational fishery. And up until recently, most of the research on snook is centered in the estuary. And it's kind of like what was talked about earlier, is you think things have been done when they really haven't. So all we have, when we would talk about snook in papers and write introductions to papers, what we would do is we would say the research that had gone on in the estuary, we could back it up with citations. But a lot of times we would say, and snook go to the rivers to overwinter. And this is just a theory and a paradigm that's been around since at least the 1950s. And if you fish for snook, you probably heard this before, and you probably read articles about it. And so simply means that we believe that snook go up to rivers to get into more warmer waters. Rivers are deep, they're dark, and it's thought to believe that there's more thermally stable water there as opposed to the shallow waters of the estuary. So we were interested in this, and the fact that there was no scientific backing for this theory, we wanted to design an experiment and test this theory and have something that we could cite and say, yes, Snook do overwinter in these rivers. And so we partnered with our Eustis and Lakeland freshwater fisheries group and designed an electrofishing study looking at examining seasonal abundances of snook in these three rivers, the Mosaic, Peace, and in the Calusa. Okay, so our hypothesis was that if we had higher abundances, we're expecting to get higher abundances in winter. And if we see our highest abundances in winter, then the overwintering theory is correct. So after 2 years of study, much to our surprise, all of our highest abundances were in the fall. And so we said, this is more interesting than we had thought. Instead of writing a paper about overwintering, we wrote a paper about our findings and just said that we needed to do more study to figure out what was going on. Now, all while this was happening, we would go out to sample, and of course we'd meet up with Jerry Carter, who fishes the river a lot, and we would say, Jerry, it's wintertime, are we going to see a lot of snook? And Jerry would say, well, if we just get some water up here, I think we'll see some fish. And just hold on to that thought, and it'll make more sense as I talk here. So we continued on. We got some funding to do another study, and in this study we were able to sample the entire Peace River pretty much. And we did that for 3 years. And then following that, we were able to continue sampling this lower section, this lower freshwater section of the river. And so what I'm going to present to you, the data that I'm going to present to you this morning is from the lower section of the river, the circle. And it's 2005 data through present. And we collected over 300 random samples. They're all from summer and fall seasons, and over 1,600 snook were collected. So here's a Google Earth shot, and you can see the area that we sampled was from the Deep Creek community to Nakati, and part of that area is tidal, part of it's non-tidal. And just notice the green strip that surrounds the river, just showing you that it's not developed. The banks are natural. It's probably most likely showing the floodplain area that hasn't been developed. And in the river, there's lots of good habitat for fish. Snags are really important habitat, so trees that have fallen into the water. And also, of course, it's a river, so we get high flows. Anybody who's fished for snook in estuary knows that if you can find a place with good structure and some flow, a little bit deeper water, you probably have a good snook spot. Well, the entire Peace River is really a good snook spot. So we use electrofishing, like Brandon talked about, and it's simply a boat with a generator on it powering a shot box, and we can administer just the right amount of current. We stun the fish and scoop them up and put them in a live well. And these are the general methods that we follow for all these data that we collected. They were randomly generated sites. We did 200-meter transects along the shoreline. We recorded depth, shoreline vegetation, basic water quality parameters, and we kept track of all of our large predators. Took a subsample that we measured, weighed, and retrieved diet. So in order to get diet from the snook, we use what they call a gastric lavage. It's a non-lethal method to retrieve diet. It simply uses a basic bilge pump and some tubes, and we can shoot water, fill up the stomach with water, and then the diet item is released and pops out into the sieve. So we kind of had to try to piece some things together. We really didn't know what was going on. We had thought one thing, but maybe we were on the verge of discovering something that was bigger and more interesting than what we had originally thought was going on. And so looking at a long-term data set, getting some insights from our co-author, Jerry Carter, and also looking at information from other studies, particularly from tropical systems. We're in subtropical Florida, but we wanted to look, we started looking in the literature at tropical floodplain river systems and seeing what was out there about those systems. And so let's take a step back and take a look at some of the information that's from these tropical systems. The salmon color or pink color area is the tropics. The yellowish color is the subtropics. And when we looked at the literature, the tropical floodplain river systems, it was just really interesting on the comments of productivity of the floodplain. The floodplains in these tropical systems were so productive, just the vast amounts of fish, species and numbers, was just really stood out to us. And in these tropical systems, they always talk about 3 seasons. A flood season where the water's up on the floodplain, a transitional season where the water is coming off the floodplain and bringing all that productivity, all the fish and vertebrates into the channel, and then a dry season. And in all these systems, there was a common tie that there's large predators that were benefiting from the productivity that was going on the floodplain. When that water would come down, all these large predators were benefiting from that floodplain production. Things like tigerfish and barramundi and large catfish in Amazon. And so here we are in subtropical Florida. It's a humid environment, and if you look at our river flows, we have a similar system going on. We've got a dry winter, spring, we've got a wet summer, we've got a transitional fall season. So what about the tropical snook? Could we lump them together? Are they doing a similar thing as these large tropical predators? Taking advantage of floodplain. Correct. Well, first let's take a look at snook abundance and see if we can tie it with flow. What I've got here is just the top graph simply just gives you a historic reference of what median flows look like. 75% of high flows and 25% of low flows. At the bottom graph is the actual flow that occurred in the Peace River during our study period from fall 2004 through fall 2013. You can see we sampled in a lot of different flow regimes. So we have a really interesting time frame to look at. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to overlay our edges of snook, abundance of snook, numbers of snook per 100 meters of shoreline. And I didn't have fun making this up. This is really, because it's just so neat how it tracks. So we're getting really high abundances during these high flow years, low abundances during the low flow years. This is a drought, a year after the drought. We presented some of this information at American Fisheries Society meeting, and people who electrofish bass, they were just amazed that we were getting 9 fish per 100 meters of shore. To them, that was like, that's a lot of big predators in here. So we ran a regression on it, and it came out pretty good. River flow explains 90% of the variability of snook abundance. So there's a big tie between flow and the numbers of snook. Next, we want to look at their condition. We weighed all these fish, and we're going to look at condition in relation to flow. And condition is simply just the weight of the fish relative to its length. Again, here's that same graph. The blue line represents the average condition for snook in the bay. So you can see really good conditions in these high flow years. Really poor condition during the drought. During drought, these fish are 8% lighter on average than the bay fish. But during high flows, they're about 6 or 7% heavier. Again, random regression. This time we looked at snook condition versus the annual number of days. The river level was greater than 2 meters, and it came out pretty good, 0.7 R-square value. And so that's just looking at the time frame, how long the floodplain stays inundated, or how long the river is up. So these long periods of flow and the river flooding equate to more snook. They also equate to larger snook. It wasn't unusual for us to see big snook like this. This guy's 26% heavier than the average bay snook. And this one's 10% heavier, and he was skinny. So a lot of the fishermen have noted catching these fish out in the estuary after they maybe had, been on a long-term feeding frenzy up in the rivers and come out into the estuary, and people would catch them and they think they caught a different species. They call them humpback snook. So we know from prior studies that snook eat prey that are abundant in their environment. So we took a look at their diet, and during the high flow years of 2005 and 2013, those are 2 high flow years, the diet consisted of almost 50% crayfish. And crayfish is a known species that uses floodplains and reproduces very well in floodplains and grows quickly when those areas are inundated. During the drought, crayfish probably didn't have very good reproduction and growing, so it's not reflected in the diet. They just weren't around. The few snook that stayed in the river during that drought were relegated to eating grass shrimp, which are about 1/2 inch in size and inch, and whereas the crayfish are about 3 to 4 inches long. So this is what it looks like in the section of the East River to south of McCabe. Just notice this is during the 2000. This is a Google shot from 2005 during the right here during the summer. All these back sloughs and floodplain areas that are inundated. The summer resident snook, those are snook that just skip spawning. They stay up there and just get really benefit from all the productivity that's going on there. That's going on in the floodplain, spilling over into the main channels where they're feeding along the edges. By late summer, early fall, we've got post-spawning snook coming up from the bay. Somehow these snook know that the river's flowing hard, and they come up here to take advantage of this prey. Kind of like a pack of wolves. By mid-fall, this is our transitional season where the water is coming down, forcing all of the prey down into the channels. Now, all the snook are just basically finishing off all of the floodplain prey, and they'll eventually start working on the more channelized prey like native catfish. So during summer drought, none of this occurs. All what I just showed you doesn't really occur. The fish don't come up. Many fish that are there have to leave, and that's the beauty about being a Euryhaline species. Is you don't have to stay. You can have the best of both worlds. You can leave when there's a drought. You don't have to go up, or you can leave and you can come down to the tidal estuary where the prey resources are more consistent, where there's pinfish and shrimp and an abundance of species. So whereas the bass and the gar are stuck there to deal with low water and a lack of prey, the snook has the advantage of going to both systems. So there's this direct and large transfer of productivity via the river floodplain from the river floodplain to the estuary. And And so we've got these big snook feeding up in the rivers, they're coming down, they're getting eaten by dolphins, which is snook are top prey for dolphins. They're probably getting eaten by sharks, and they're getting taken by us. So this snook that this guy caught, when you're out there in estuary fishing, it's interesting to think, okay, this snook was up in the rivers just 3 weeks ago, probably eating 15 crayfish a day, and now it's down in the mangroves. So in order for this connection to occur, in order for this transfer to occur, there has to be the connections. And of course, we converted some of our rivers to reservoirs. That separates that connection. Even our Niagara River, Wild and Scenic River, has 4 weirs on it, which is a separation between certain parts of the year when the water's low. So high flows are important for snook. They allow for prey production on the floodplain, and this is just something that we can keep in mind when we're balancing our regional water needs. Just want to thank you guys, and thank all of these people who supported this project, and just a lot of people put a lot of effort to do the sampling, and we're really appreciative. Thanks.
How you doing? I saw that blue tilapia and brown hoplo made up a big portion of their diet when they're up there, and they're both non-natives.
Yeah.
Do you have any feel for if those fish weren't there, what they would be?
Yeah, that's funny. It's like I paid to ask that question. Because my next slide is this. I had this just in case we had enough time. And the native prey would be crayfish. That's typically what they would have eaten before, would be all crayfish. But now we've got these exotic floodplain species that are in our rivers. And this picture right here was taken, or this was diet that was retrieved from one day on the Niagara River looking at the snook diet. And so the snook are eating exotic species from 3 different continents. So it's kind of interesting to think about. And those guys, those are the 4 species that they had in their stomachs. So the African jewelfish, blue tilapia, walking catfish, and brown hoplo. So these guys are actually really enhancing the snook condition. Anytime you have an exotic species that comes into a new system, there's a certain naiveness. So these fish are able to reproduce like crazy in the floodplain, but maybe the timing doesn't last long enough for them to get to adult stage, so they're more vulnerable to predation. There's a lot of different aspects, and that's a really another avenue that we'd like to see someone take the ball and run with studying, because we kind of feel like the snook are the best eradicators of the exotic species that we could ever have. So if we have a healthy population of predators, we will have less exotic species. Because the bass are doing the same exact thing. The bass and the snook have almost identical diet.
Well, I've got a question and an update. It was great that you're able to pull in data from 2013 in your presentation. Are you continuing this sampling?
We'd like to. We currently don't have funding for it, but we're trying to make the best of it that we can. So we're possibly going to be able to do the summer fall thing on the piece. It's kind of in the air right now because of all the offshore work that's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And this is an update and a credit to the National Estuary Program. I'm with the Water Management District, and I work on minimum flows of the Lower Peace River. And when we adopted minimum flows of the Lower Peace, the Estuary Program and others said, try to pull in some more ecological information. And I heard Phil give sort of a version of this talk at a Coastal Estuaries Conference, and less years of data is very convincing. So what the Water Management District is doing is we have a mechanistic hydrodynamic model of the Lower Peace River, and And we normally stopped our analyses around the water treatment plant. But what we've done is we're updating the model and taking it all the way up to Nocatee. And one of the variables we're going to look at is inundation of the floodplain is a variation of flow. And we really hope to incorporate inundation of the floodplain into the consideration of minimum flows of the Lower Peace River, which are being reevaluated. So based on your information.
Sid, thanks for explaining that. I really appreciate that because I wanted to incorporate that, but I didn't have to say it, so thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely based on the information and data you guys have collected. That's where we're going with that. Thanks.